just like one time when you were playing with a cat. I was like, no. I didn't realize what you were saying.
Oh, no, it's reserved. Reserved. It's reserved. Oh. That's all. It'll be fine.
flight tonight. Fly tonight. All right. Plans this weekend, or you just gonna sleep? It doesn't end. Good for you. What time is it? She used to raise a lot of money. Just 10,000 with your money. Pretty great.
We go to Miami and we go to hospital.
She's a lot of what? Oh my gosh, yeah. I just go to everything. That's all I can do. I work on like a startup company where like a new credit card. So I do that, and then I was also teaching debate, the art of debate conversation with adults, which is a lot of fun. Yeah, now I'm kind of working on like nice dinners where we just get together and have really meaningful conversations. So we're actually gonna have our first one on Saturday. So I'm a little nervous, but I feel like it'll be a lot of fun. I guess I feel like a lot of my kids start having a hard time talking about really important things as we get older. Because as you get older, you seem to like care less. I think it's important to really conversations going about what's happening in the world. Obviously, this country right now is just crazy. Everything's happening. So we should talk about that kind of stuff. And over food, everybody's happy when they're eating. So that's kind of the idea, is that we're all eating and drinking wine, and forget we can have conversations. Hopefully people don't drink too much, and then people get angry. Hey, you have a reserved seat. How you doing? Congrats on the morning. Anything you guys like above and beyond surprises? That's pretty good news. Are you so surprised?
Good evening, everyone, and sorry for the slightly late start. Welcome to the Asia Society. I'm Tom Nagorski, Executive Vice President here. It's great to have you with us. Great to have those watching on the webcast, the live stream as well. And what a privilege to have our guests with us tonight. You are all in for some inspiration, and you're in for a treat. We're in the midst of a great season of India that was begun a couple of months ago here at the Asia Society. The hallmark of that, as some of you may know, is a wonderful exhibition in the galleries downstairs. We invite you, it's not open now, but to come back on another day if you haven't seen them. This is a show of the artists who are known as the Bombay Progressives. The show is called Progressive India. It's the first gathering of the work of those artists in this country in a great long time, and it's gotten terrific reviews. When it came to the subject of putting together a season of programming around this business, policy, the arts, etc., my colleague Sanjeev Surchan came to me. He's not Indian, he's Nepali, but he said, Tom, if we're going to do a season of programming about India, do me this one favor. There's one program we have to do. There's one person we have to invite. And Sanjeev is a great colleague. He doesn't say that to me often. But he said, please watch a Netflix documentary called Daughters of Destiny, and please read about the work of Dr. Abraham George. And the rest, you might say, is history. Perhaps the best way to frame this conversation in this program tonight would be to ask a fundamental question that is in the flyer for this event, if you saw it on paper or online. Quote, what does it take to change a life? And it sounds like a very simple question, but it isn't, of course, and the answers, some of which you'll hear tonight, are extraordinary. Dr. Abraham George and the school known as Shanti Bhavan have a really, truly inspiring and profound answer to that question, and a profound story about how to change not just one life, but many, many lives, how to break the cycles of poverty and prejudice from the very first time, in many cases, that a child walks into a school. Dr. George is founder of Shanti Bhavan, a school, as they say, for the poorest of the poor in India. He's also dean of the Indian Institute of Journalism and New Media in Bangalore. We say this about many of our guests, but really his has been what you would call a Renaissance life and career already in finance, high-tech, entrepreneurship. He's also an accomplished author of several books, including the highly acclaimed India Untouched, The Forgotten Face of Rural Poverty. But it is his work in transforming young lives that we will hear about and celebrate tonight. And as that Netflix documentary that Sanjeev insisted I watch says, the girls go from invisible to unstoppable. Dr. George will be up on the stage in a moment. He will be joined later by Ajit George, Director of Operations at Shanti Bhavan, where, to put it briefly, he makes the trains run properly, among many other things, as well as helping with mentorship, career development, so that long after that first day of school for a child, there is a pathway to success beyond the classroom. And yes, if you didn't know already, Ajit George is Abraham George's son. And Kristen Brandt will moderate the program tonight. She's co-founder and chief programs officer at an organization called She's the First, STF for short. That's an NGO that supports and trains girls who will be first in their families to graduate from high school, hence the title, She's the First. They have been partners with Shanti Bhavan since 2009, having supported their first ever scholarship recipient, a student named Jansi. And since then, STF has supported Shanti Bhavan with grants of more than $500,000. And to this day, the organizations, as we've just been talking, work in tandem as thought partners to support girls and the disenfranchised in India and beyond. So all around, prepare to be inspired tonight. And to begin with, please welcome to the Asia Society stage the great and inspiring Dr. Abraham George.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Sanjeev. Thank you, Asia Society, for giving me the opportunity, giving us the opportunity to speak to you and to present this brief first episode of Daughters of Destiny. And we'll be taking questions. So I won't talk much about Shanti Bhavan right now, except to say that my experience for the last 23 years with the school, bringing up children from the poorest to the poor, and now after many years, they are now working in large companies, names like Goldman Sachs, Amazon, and so on. It's a story that that is very inspiring even for myself, because what empowerment means to young lives, what is possible. I often tell people that don't ever think that children from deprived homes can't succeed. If you bring them up well, if you give them the same type of education that you would give, all of us, part of the affluent society, who we give the kind of education and love, they will succeed just like anyone else. And what these kids from the age of 4 who are with us now past college, some are studying here in the United States, some are in Japan, and so on. This story has never happened in the history of India. The children coming from the poorest of the poor and socially deprived Dalit community, or the so-called untouchables, what they have accomplished. And it's you will see a little bit of it, the story of 5 girls. It's an equal co-ed, equal number of boys and girls, but Netflix chose girls in this presentation, and then we'll take questions from you. So thank you again, Asia Society, and all of you for coming. It's a great privilege for me to talk to you. Thank you.
come to the stage. Sorry for the abrupt ending, but we need to come to the conversation. Please come to the stage. Maybe applause while we do this. I've neglected to mention. I neglected to mention in my opening remarks, and this will almost seem mundane after what you've just seen and what you're about to hear. We have a reception afterwards. You're all welcome. That's all I want to say. Dr. George, Christine, Ajit, it's all yours.
Okay. Thank you for having us. Can you all hear me okay?
I
Great.
don't think it's working.
It is. It is.
It's
Yeah,
working?
I think we're okay. So I'm very excited to be here today. After 9 years of partnering with Shanti Bhavan, I think that this is the first time we've ever shared a stage, which means I have 9 years worth of questions to ask both of these gentlemen. And we will have an opportunity for audience Q&A as well. So I encourage you, if you have questions of your own, to hold on to them, because I'll be coming for you next. Dr. George, I want to hear from you first. Originally, you were working in finance. And so I think we'd all just love to hear a little bit more about what compelled you to leave the financial life behind and to start Shanti Bhavan.
Well, it goes back many years before I got myself into finance, Wall Street and all of that. Actually, from the time I was a military officer in India, traveling all over India and seeing poverty and social discrimination. And at that early age of 19 or 20, I felt that that's where I want to end up one day. So coming to the United States and studying and having a job in my own company, that was a means to an end. And the end was dealing with social discrimination and economic opportunities. So that was burning inside me. So this inspiration, I didn't get it from anywhere else. It was just watching poor people, how the affluent society was looking down at them and treating them, and knowing very well that if you give opportunity, just like I had, coming to America and studying and so on, they can do well. I was convinced that was possible. So the inspiration is purely born out of what I had seen.
I didn't realize you had had the idea so young. We actually, my co-founder and I, Tammy, had the idea. We were 20 and 23.
Tammy is here, by the way.
And I often say that part of the reason we started She's the First was youthful naivete. So glad to see that we had that in common. Ajit, going into a family business or a family organization is not always an easy decision. So I would love to hear from you, what made you decide to join your father in his work? Because you hadn't always.
Yeah. At first it was necessity. We were, the 2008 crisis took a real toll on our family and took a real toll on the organization. And you know, my father asked me to step up and help with what we were doing. That opened the door to seeing how important the work was. And what I do now, working with Shanti Bhavan has transformed my life. It has become more than a job or work. It is a cause and a mission that has fulfilled my life and has been powerful in shaping who I am and what I see can be done in the world. So I think it's an easy choice now, but it wasn't initially. Yeah, I really grew to love it.
Do you ever find the dynamic between father and boss and son and employee to be a challenging one?
Especially in the early years, it's complicated, right? It's your father, and then he's your boss. I think what has been extraordinary is that I've gotten to get a lot closer with him and got to understand his vision, who he is, what he sees, and I think vice versa, that we have a genuinely beautiful shared relationship in service to something bigger than either one of us.
bigger than either one of us could accomplish on our own. And doing this together has been an incredibly meaningful and powerful journey for me.
I just want to be sure that you all understand it's not a family business. It just happens that I could tap him to help me. That's all.
And Ajay, you referenced how big this is and kind of how big the work that you're doing is. And Dr. George, when you first started this, you had a very specific vision. You wanted to work with some of the poorest of the poor in India. Why did you decide to focus there? What were the challenges or obstacles that you saw people facing that you really wanted to change?
Well, it was very clear to me from the time I traveled in India that a great majority, maybe 2/3 of India's population at that time, 40, 50 years ago, they were extremely poor. And then I also realized that some 250 million people are called untouchables. And they are looked down upon, like Karthika said in the film. And I was looking for a solution to the problem. And the world's approach to the problem was literacy programs, bare minimum education, and they get them a job so they can feed their families. It didn't appeal to me. And given the large numbers, there is no way few people impacted by programs like this can take care of the problem. They in turn must be able to take care of hundreds of others. So I was quite convinced from my experience in America that the trick is to multiply the effect, which is to say that, like some of these kids said, that their mission in life is after they take care of their families, they should go out and help strangers in need. And I tell them, listen, it doesn't have to be in India. It can be in Africa. It can be anywhere. But before your time is over, you should have at least, that's a yardstick I gave them, at least 100 others you must touch, maybe millions more, you know, if you are in a great position. So that multiplicative effect is the solution, and that is possible only if these kids are extremely successful. And we have, in these 23 years, shown or proved that they can be successful. They are extremely successful. They are empowered to change the world. And beautiful children, and they are on a mission. And not just professionally successful, but children who grow up with moral authority, do the right thing, speak always the truth, and be humble. So many other qualities that make us human. And so that's what all of us who are in Shanti Bhavan are striving to do, not just give them a good education, but also to bring them up well so that they'll be good human beings. And the obstacles were, there are always obstacles, you know, but I made some decisions right from day one that there are no government officials here, I can say this, that I will not deal with the government. Because in India, if you take money from the government for any reason, then they will demand bribes. So that was one rule I followed. There are many other rules, but you know, you saw that taking body parts and so on, that they were initial obstacles. The landlords or the village leaders were against us because we were impacting the society. The so-called untouchables were now becoming more powerful. Their children are going to do well better than the landlord's children. So we were creating social, you know, disturbance for them. And so they were against us. There were attempts to even kill me. But, you know, you have to find your way through. You don't get into this unless you are ready to face those things. So I don't think of those obstacles as anything, you know, big deal. You just have to work your way through.
problem with having someone like Dr. George as a mentor is that you're never allowed to have an excuse for anything, ever. But the children, too, have many, many obstacles, both when they start Shanti Bhavan, throughout their time at Shanti Bhavan. Ajay, maybe you can share some of what the children are facing as they come to you.
Yeah, it's interesting from a working graduate perspective. When I first started with Shanti Bhavan, I think I thought of the problem of poverty is simply an income problem. If a child makes or a person makes over X amount of dollars per year, they're out of poverty. If they make under X amount of dollars per year, they're in poverty. What I learned over the years that I've worked with the organization is poverty is complex, and poverty takes many forms. It can be sexual and physical abuse, it can be alcoholism, it can be generational debt, it can be a misogynistic system. And all of these different pressures combined will continue to push down a child. So our working graduates, for instance, are working in these fantastic companies like Goldman Sachs or Amazon, Mercedes-Benz, and so on. And their careers are fantastic, and they see a world ahead of them. And yet, simultaneously, the pressures of poverty are pulling them down. One of the starkest cases is generational poverty. Debts incurred by their parents, maybe even their grandparents' time, to illegal moneylenders. And they cannot escape that. I'll give you just a story that really illustrates this. It was my father's birthday, and a young man by the name of Aneeth, who at the time was working at Deloitte. He had started at EY, he moved over to Deloitte. If you met him, he would be the most polished, well-spoken young man. You would never have guessed the kind of circumstances and hardships that he comes from. He was there to celebrate my father's birthday, but he was on his phone talking to somebody I didn't know who at the time, and he seemed really disturbed. And I said, Aneeth, come on, let's go. My father's going to go blow out the candles. And he said, no, I need to use your computer for a minute. And I said, sure, but what's going on? He said, I need to move money from my account to the bank account I set up for my parents because there are money lenders at their door, and if they don't give them the money now, they will beat my parents up. And I just stared at him in blank disbelief for a minute. This was this incredibly well-polished young man who has this great career in Bangalore. And on the other hand, there is another part of his life that is still trapped in poverty, where his parents struggle to make ends meet, and he takes care of all of their costs. He is the sole breadwinner for the entire family. So everything from food on their table to healthcare to the roof over their head to clothes on their back, everything is taken care of by him. And he set up a bank account for them, and he creates a budget for them, and he gives them the money. But if he doesn't move money in that moment to their account, his parents will be beaten up by moneylenders. And that is one of the obstacles that I think I've come to realize, and we've come to realize as an organization, is it isn't so simple. And that is why Shanti Bhavan was created, because simple answers to poverty don't exist. They are much more complicated than you think. So we have to arm our children with complex tools to face those challenges. Powerful education, strong mentorship, career opportunities, abilities to pay off those debts and to raise them up forward. A lot of our kids are really excited about their futures and want to build their own companies. And much like people in the U.S. they're these bright entrepreneurs and ready to do things. But unlike me, who grew up in a family of wealth and privilege, that if I made mistakes, and let me tell you, I've made 100 of them, I always had my father to step up and take care of me when I made a mistake. I always knew that if I fell, he would pick me up, that my mother would pick me up, my aunts and uncles would pick me up, my grandparents would pick me up. It's the opposite. They can't take those risks, because if they take a risk and they fail, everything goes downhill for their entire family. All the food, all the electricity, all the clothes, everything is at risk when they take a single risk. So they can't risk building companies because everyone depends on them. And these are some of the challenges. There's so many more going on. But they're really complex challenges. And so as an organization, we are constantly in conversation with our working graduates trying to solve those problems.
And this is something I've heard Ajay talk about before. I've heard you describe this as the web of poverty, which I thought was such a potent metaphor. And I thought about it again when I was rewatching the clip just now, because Marie says multiple times in just that clip that she needs to get a good job so she can send money to her mom, or she needs to take care of her mom. Her mom and her mother's well-being, it figures so largely in her imagination, even as a 7-year-old. And I wonder, because too, in this film, you know, there's a tagline about how Shanti Bhavan cares for children from their first day of school to their first day on the job. But that's not actually true, is it? Because I know that you're in constant contact with these adults as they go out into the world, and they're navigating situations like the one that you just or the one that you just mentioned. So I wonder, you know, did you anticipate kind of keeping in such close contact throughout, and how have you managed to take on not just school, but also university and those steps into adulthood?
Honestly, I didn't think that the program will go to college and beyond. But then I found out something about myself, and that happened almost 12 years after I started the school. The school was being photographed by, videotaped by an anchor woman from ABC News in London. And after she spent the day and was walking with me along the pavers of school, and she turned to me and said, Abraham, I can see that you love the kids and the kids love you, but tell me what have you learned about yourself that you didn't know? And I hadn't thought in those ways, but I suddenly came to the realization that about myself, which was that I didn't know when I first started that I could love 300 kids same way as I love him. And today I can honestly tell you that there is no difference between him and any of those 300 kids. And they see me as their dad. And if you can do that, how can you leave them after school? How can you leave them after college? How can you leave them anytime? As long as I live, I'm for them. And I get every other day something. Today, one of the kids wrote to me saying that I got the job at Mercedes-Benz. So I said, some sweet note I always said, yes, Preeta, darling, you got, I'm so happy for you. And I look forward to coming and having a cup of coffee with you when I come back. You know. So you have to be there for them, and the most powerful weapon you have, not the weapon, the most powerful thing you can do for them is to love them. And they have to know that you love them. And if you do, and if you really do, then you have the ability to impact them and guide them and change them, you know, and they make mistakes, you correct them, and they wouldn't mind.
So Shanti Bhavan's mission is to empower children from impoverished backgrounds to take control of their lives and bring positive change to their families and communities. And I've always really loved that phrasing because it puts the focus directly on the students, on the children, as being the change makers. And I think that's fairly unique in the NGO world. A lot of times organizations like to talk about the change that they create. But Shanti Bhavan is so focused on the change that your students, that your kids are creating in the world. And I'd love to hear about what are some of the other elements of Shanti Bhavan's model or philosophy that you really think sets Shanti Bhavan apart.
Let him try first and then
Oh, God.
What sets us apart? I think it's the deep intervention. I think it's a deep intervention in our overall philosophy. There are two pillars that I think of for Shanti Bhavan. One is excellence. In everything we do, we strive towards excellence. And this is something that my father set forward first. I think by his own career looked at how he succeeded, and that was being excellent and striving towards success in everything he did. And we do that for our kids too. There's often a misconception or an internal bias that I think society has, which is to say, we think children from poverty have only, or people from poverty can only do so much and no more. That person on the street, you know, we feel sorry for them, but we also think perhaps maybe that is where that's the most they can get to. And we think they can only succeed to a certain level, but that maybe they will never sit at the same dining table with us and share a meal with us or occupy the same office with us and have the same job. And society, I think, has this bias, and we act on that bias by the resources, the limited resources we give to poverty alleviation and education programs. When you do that, a child from poverty will know it. Right? If you look at a child and say, my expectations are you're only going to get, you know, X grade, or it's okay if you do so well but not this well. If you lower your standard, people will perform to that lowered standard. Shanti Bhavan has the opposite. We have set high standards and an expectation of excellence with the resources to get there. And we don't say, no, it's okay if you do really poorly. We say, no, you have to do really well. We want you to do well. We will give you the resources to do well. And we have expectations of that. And I think that is a really different outlook than I have seen from other models. The second aspect that I think that sets us apart is a strong sense of social and civic responsibility. We believe that all of us, have a responsibility to our fellow brothers and sisters, to our fellow members of society. We are an interconnected community of people. We're not islands. We did not get to where we are by ourselves. All of us did something as part of a group. Other people came before us and built things, and they gave us opportunities and opened up doors for us. And what we tell the kids are, you don't owe me or my father or any donor or any supporter or she's the first anything. They're nobody's looking for their money back, and they're not looking for something back from you. But you do owe it to people who are left behind. You do owe it to those who have never given the opportunities that you have. And that if you have any responsibility in this society, it is to pay it forward and to uplift others like you have been uplifted by those who come before you. And I think that really sets us apart.
If I may add, we have to deal with the children every minute of the day and all through the same way as I dealt with you, or your own children, our own children. They have to know you're there for them all the time. It is not like just, oh, I'm going to give you education, I'm going to give you food, and you work hard, and that type of thing. No, they have to feel a belonging. They have to feel a sense of security. They have to know that you love them every minute of the day. You have to be there for them, and that is possible. That is possible only if you genuinely love them. That is a little difficult in the NGO world, because you have to be there for each child. When I am there, I hardly do any paperwork at all. I am all the time, walking by the corridor and doing this to the hair or pulling somebody's ears, making eye contact or whatever that is, so that the kids know that I'm there. And if I do for 25 kids today and do another 25 tomorrow, in a week I would have covered all the kids, That is my job, actually, apart from, of course, the staff. You have to motivate the staff. They have to buy into the mission. All of that is very important. But the way this work that I think is different from most of the NGOs is that personal, total commitment to children.
So I'm about out of time, and so I have just 2 questions I have to get in. So they're going to be very, very fast. But Ajay, I'd love to hear, in as few words as possible, when you think 5, 10, 20 years in the future, where are your kids?
I think they're building companies, and I think they're building NGOs, and I think they're running for political office. But most of all, I think they're building systems that neither my father and I can envision. New systems of government and new systems of doing business, born out of poverty, but built out of success. And those systems will hopefully transform society. I see of our kids as societal change makers.
And in one word, because I really enjoy the theme of this whole endeavor by the Asia Society, I would love to know, in one word, what does it take to change a life?
You want to start?
This is when he gets to be the dad.
I don't know. Maybe I'm a little more emotional thing about it. One word is love.
Follow that up, Ajay.
That's a tough one to follow up, but I'd say passion. Yeah.
I mean, there are so many things you got to do. I mean, hundreds of things I can list, but if you don't have love for them, it won't work.
Okay, thank you both for answering my questions. I would like to turn it out to the audience now. So if there are questions out here, we have a microphone. Let's go here.
Yeah, I actually have a couple of questions. So I presume that this is a boarding school that children attend and all through the year, and they probably go home for the summer and be with their parents,
Right.
something like that. Yeah. So the couple of questions are, and I understand the fact that when you say that you give a child the opportunity, they do really well, they thrive. But what do you do with children? I mean, in a class, there are bound to be children who lag behind and have trouble catching up. How do you deal with that? Because, you know, here in public schools, there's a very big problem of kids struggling and them getting kids to perform. So I wanted to hear that. And I have another question about, since you were talking about the village panchayats or the landowners wanting, I mean, being angry with you, have you opened up admission to allow their children to come in and study, you know, so that there's no antagonism, you know, built in the community?
Thank you.
First part.
Yeah, I'll answer the first part. Over the early years, we had a higher level of attrition because we did not understand how to handle some of these challenges. We have learned pretty well, though, over the last 21 years of the organization's, the school's existence, that there are multiple ways to reach a child that are struggling, and we have instituted them. Some of them are peer-to-peer tutoring, and peer-to-peer tutoring is very effective. But a lot of extra help from teachers, from our volunteer staff, from their own peers. We have a very strong policy of ensuring that every child can pass our exams as well as the national exams, the ICSE and the ISC exams, which are the two of the toughest, if you're familiar with the system, the two of the toughest national exams. And with these individualized, high level of intervention per child, it has been very effective. And so our resources are well spent in that regard.
Every day, every week, every Friday, we have myself, and there is another lady whose husband is a doctor. We have Skype calls when we are here. We go through every child in the higher grades who have problems, and then we jointly with the staff, we figure out what's the solution. So it doesn't mean that we'll always be perfectly successful. Our mission is not necessarily to produce those who are going to get 99 percentile or something like that. We would rather have kids who do, right now the 85% is the minimum that we want the children to have, but we want them to be all-round, holistic, capabilities. So in that sense, somebody might say that there are schools that are doing better than us, you know, academically, which we are not trying to. We are not trying to train them for example, the IITs of India. It's not one of our goals. But I feel that our kids will succeed just as well, if not better, by being all around and communicative, and you saw these kids at the early age. So that's that. Now, the other part of the question, But we do fail in some cases and we lose some kids. In the other part of it, we are very tough. We will not budge with demands. There have been panchayat officials who said they are going to burn down the school. So we have our own group, locals from another place who will confront them. We have taken government officials to high court, writ, petitions filed. Even the collector of the district, we take them to court, and we fight it out. They ask us to withdraw, and they keep quiet. There have been instances where the deputy collector comes with a bulldozer to plow the whole road, access road, because we supposedly went into some portion of their road, and we took the sub-collector to court. So if you give in once, you lost. And that is an investment that we make. And we have our own groups of people in the community who are willing to confront these people.
Well, not said, because one of your policies is also that those who work for you from the surrounding community, they do have a slot at Shanti Bhavan for their children, right?
Right. We have their children there. We build homes for them, houses for them. We have a savings plan where they put in some savings and we match that. We drill wells for them. We repair the schools, government schools. So we can't live in isolation in this community. We have to take care of the village too, but not in a big way, in a small way.
There's a question from the moderator inbox that I'm very excited about, actually. And they say, I caught something in Dr. George's comments about why India. He said India was poorer then. It does lead to thinking about India's rapid growth and the increasing number of wealthy Indians and the growing middle class there. And so they're just wondering, has this impacted your work? Do you see increased generosity or donations, increased volunteers from within India and the growing middle and upper classes there?
Okay. The first part of the question being, what was that? The first part was?
That you had said that India was poorer then.
Yeah. I could have gone to Africa. It would have made no difference. But I have a comparative advantage. I look like an Indian. Unfortunately, I don't speak any of the languages. The only language I can speak is English. You saw me speaking in English. They're translating for me. But I found out very quickly that you don't need to speak the language. They figure it out from your facial expressions and whether you care. And now, I have broken language here and there. I manage, But that's not a handicap. So the answer is that, it could have been elsewhere. I would love to work with another country, Maybe I'll work with you one day. The second part of the question is to do with...
the growing middle and upper class in India.
Yeah.
Have you seen increased generosity there?
I find the non-resident Indians, like him, who are born here, of Indian origin, are very different from my generation. They don't have all these burdens that, or preferences that my generation grew up with. Oh, which religion are you? Which caste are you? Which is this and that, The NRI, as they call them, non-resident Indians, they are willing to help anyone from any state, any religion. So it's exciting. A large portion of our donation comes from the non-resident Indians and other from non-Indians in America. And I find that America is the place where we get a great majority of our funds from. Strangers in the mail who watch them film and then they send the check. People in India, it's a little harder. I don't like to say anything negative, but it is not very easy to get money in India. I'll leave it as that.
We go back here in gray.
Thank you for a very inspiring talk. And my question is, how on earth do you choose which child comes to you? because there must be so many children. So how do you determine, do they have to apply? Just give us some sort of idea of how the process works. Very helpful.
Yeah, in the initial stage, we had to go to the villages, some 80 villages we went and told the story, and you saw there all kinds of rumors, the landlord spread, and it was difficult. But today, some 300, 400 families come. It is heartbreaking. All of them, or a great majority of them, do deserve to have their kids join us. We can only take 24. That's why Ajit is trying to create the second Shanti Bhavan, and hopefully in his lifetime, many more Shanti Bhavans will open. It is a tough decision. We select on the basis of the income level. It has to be below the poverty level, which is today it's like $2 or $3 per day for a family of 4 or 5. That is a minimum, that is a requirement. If they are above that, they cannot. And so we have to go and see their hut and so on to be sure they are not cheating us. And then single mothers and orphans, children who are orphans, they get preference. And the third, it's a subjective thing, you know, we have to sort of figure out whether the kid will succeed, because we can't lower the standard. And that is not been very good. We have not been very good at that, you know, figuring it out at 3.5, 4, whether the child will succeed later on, you know. So.
We also put an emphasis on, we try to make sure that the families are committed to the program. We don't want a family to pull their daughter out at 12 or 13 and marry her off, or pull out their son at 14 and put him in the field to work or put him in a quarry to work. They have to be invested in the program and believe in the program, the longevity of the program.
Back left was up first.
I'm sure you get this question a lot, but with so much need in India and elsewhere, have you got a strategy for scaling, either building it yourself or doing a training center for others that want to take the model, whether it's, you know, Uganda or Haiti or elsewhere in India?
Yeah, it will be very nice if we could identify people who demonstrate their leadership and their commitment to the cause, and they're willing to do, and they can find the resources for doing it. We'll be more than happy to train them in Shanti Bhavan. We are more than happy to have them stay with us. Our hope is that the children of Shanti Bhavan in 10 years will begin to create Shanti Bhavans. But anywhere, any country, they want to spend time with us. As long as they can demonstrate that they mean what they are saying, we'll be happy to do that.
Over the years, we've had a number of organizations and individuals come to us with the desire to learn from us. One of the challenges we've noticed is that they've altered the model, so it's no longer what we've designed. Some of them do a mixed model. There was an example of one mixed model where half of the kids were from poor communities and half from wealthy. Several years later, they came back to us telling us the whole problem, there was a disaster, that the program is in serious trouble. And that's because a class system got built up. The kids from wealth had a different system, and their parents were starting to get involved. The black market was built up. It was crazy. Another one lowered their expectations and their academic standards, and so the kids were underperforming. And so we've seen a lot of those examples. So we're also very cautious about who we're willing to partner with and how we work with them. I think scale is a matter of resources. We have to have a will to invest in programs like this that can dramatically change the education and income level and class level of a society. I genuinely believe we can build a number of Shanti Bhavans and help lead them and transform the nation through them.
Just talking about resources, you might wonder, this is all a very expensive program. No, not really. We educate them with good number of teachers, aunties or caregivers who stay with them and look after them, their bedding, their clothing, their medical, their food, recreation, name everything that we give our children, right? It all costs, the cost per child per day is equal to one Starbucks coffee, $4.50. What is the price of Starbucks these days? $4.50 per day is our budget per child. So it is not a lack of resources. The world has got plenty of money, but a commitment to doing it.
I think one of the difficulties too, we run a network of organizations and schools, and the Shanti Bhavan model is not one that you can impose on an existing organization or with a foundation that's already in existence. It's really something that gets built from the ground up.
Right.
So it's a struggle for organizations who try to go otherwise.
But still, when you're talking about 350 kids and 365 days, you multiply 4.5, you come up to $600,000 budget. So that's also a problem. That's the resource issue.
And I would be remiss as a moderator if I did not mention that Shanti Bhavan is raising funds for their second school. So if you happen to have your checkbook with you, I don't know, there might be some people. But I do have time for one last question. Yeah, here.
Sorry to take the last question, but thank you for this. What I would like to ask is, when you first started, what markers did you use to measure progress and like success of the program? And the reason why I'm asking is because I'm from Sierra Leone, West Africa, and I would really like the opportunity to not steal your model, but to implement the idea in itself in West Africa, because we want to work with orphan kids from Ebola-stricken areas. So currently, right now, we're housing 7 young girls, and what you said was really hitting at the heart, because it's about love. And so what we're able to provide to them right now is the home. But one of the things I think, or I would say the thing that makes yours stand apart from the rest is actually the educational part. And so mine is trying to figure out how we can implement something of what you guys do back in our own country. And I like the question she had asked, because I think it is true. There's a way to have a mentorship program or something like that to learn about some of these steps. Because I know it won't work necessarily the same way, but the truth is, Dr. Abram, you have found a solution to something. And so for those of us in the developing world, we would like to find ways to implement what might work best for us, but not like we want to skim from anything you do, but we want to see if it will actually work in Sierra Leone, West Africa as well.
I want to answer this question because it's a very important question, very very meaningful.
I don't. You can.
Okay,
can.
I'll
Gosh, Dad.
there is no substitute for good performance. You can't lower it. If you lower the standard that you want the children, the competence at each level, okay, what they should reach when they get through 2nd grade, 3rd grade. You have to be very clear. Teachers have to know. Everybody has to know. You start diluting it, you lost it. Then in the public arena, of course, there is, in India you have the board exams, national level. 85% we demand that they get that academically. Now, in terms of other skills, leadership skills, communication skills, social grace, and then humane qualities such as being kind, generous, compassionate, not selfish. That's a little more tricky. That you have to do every day of your life. All the staff have to do. It's not something you can read out from the book and they'll learn. Every day. You cannot have one mistake made. If I told the kids one lie in my 23 years, one lie, stand in front of them and told one lie, I lost everything. So you have to make sure that all the staff buy into that. So the answer is in bringing them up, that is what it is. But ultimately, the test is where do they end up? In our case, nobody believed that these kids would end up with Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley and all these companies, Amazon and so on. Every one of them in multinational companies. And some are gone, finished their masters, they're doing MPhil, and so on. Some are in a few countries. So that is the proof. That's where you have to get to. So if you start making compromises in these things, then you lost it. And that needs, all your key people really buying into your mission.
We also have a training program in Sierra Leone, so see me after. Yeah. But unfortunately,
Can I follow up? Because there's one thing real quick. There's something you do where the kids go home. I think they're able to go back because it's a boarding school, so they actually come from parents, right? Well, ours, because they're orphans, in a sense, it's like we are responsible for them, so we never want to send them back. But what touched me was that you are keeping them connected with where they're from, because that is the end result. A lot of NGOs, you give money, you give scholarships, the kids grow up, they do this, and a lot of times they leave the continent and they come back. Where you're directing your resources in a sense to get these kids to go back home to where they're from. And we're trying to make sure we can also do that. So it's a little harder because they are orphans, but we're trying to find ways to keep them connected with their communities where they come from, so that the end game is that they take the resources and the development and the knowledge back home.
Now, it might sound a little cruel for me to say this. We find the home is one of our biggest problems. They undo in that 1 month or 2 months everything we taught them. And I can give you so many different examples. For example, the father comes having stolen from the village, neighbor's vegetable farm, and he comes with a whole bunch of vegetables, and the kid asks, where did you get this? I picked it from so-and-so place. Why did you steal it? You didn't pay. He said, well, the mother says, you can't feed with truth alone. Now, these are realities of poverty. But at the same time, the kid thinks that stealing is okay. So sexual abuse, they see women who don't have husbands sleeping with other men, every day different man, because somebody gives some money. All these things are happening. So poverty has its own problems. But what we hope is the love that the mother gives is a reassurance. So you have to make up, they are orphans, you have to make up with people who have a kind heart. The child can go for a month to that home where they would treat with dignity, with love. And that's a little tough, but sometimes you find in the community people are willing to take the kids and look after them well during that 1 month. But then you have a problem to make sure that when the kids grow bigger, there is no abuse in that place, It's a complicated business. The whole thing is complicated. We train our kids every time they go home with play acting and 50 other things, how sexual abuse takes place. Your uncle will come to you, take you to the corner. We dramatize this. We go through all this and just to protect the kid. And when they come back, we have a debriefing. What happened at home, and then we find some problem. Then we call the parents, and then we tell them we'll put you in jail. We'll get after you. So many things like that happen, and you have a bigger burden because you will have to send the kids to strangers' homes.
Okay, I know that we all have many more questions, and luckily there is a reception after this at which you can ask all of them of our two friends. So I just would like to take a moment to thank the two of you for joining me on stage.
And thank you, Kristen.
And for sharing your wisdom with us. And we will see you out there.
Thank you so much. Thank you all very much for coming and listening to us. Thank you.